We need, as an industry, hospitality needs a voice at the table. It really does, because we are so important for the image, for tourism, for the international perception of Australia. Hospitality does so much more than just cook food.
Today on Dirty Linen, we are heading to Mornington, the gateway to the Mornington Peninsula outside of Melbourne. Our guest today is Sean Flanagan. He's an owner of Wildgrain, a business with a few different aspects to it. There's a garden, there's restaurants, there's beautiful food and a lovely setting. But we're going to talk about some of the challenges of running a restaurant out of big cities and some of the government policies that make it harder for business owners to have things running smoothly. Sean, there is a lot to cover. Welcome to Dirty Linen.
Hi, Dani. How are you? Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity. Yeah.
Well, I'm really grateful to you for coming on the show. Let's start by talking about Wildgrain. Set the scene for us. What would people experience when they come and visit?
So we came across Wildgrain probably 3.5 years ago, and we previous to this we were in Sydney, and we'd operated quite a few businesses in Sydney, and then moved down to the peninsula. And it was very different coming out of Sydney and then coming down to the peninsula and finding a space that we really just grabbed us really. And as soon as we walked in the doors into this building, it was like an initial feeling of energy, which was amazing. It used to be an old grain store back in the 50s that used to do specialty grain feeds for horses and show cattle and all that sort of thing. So we really wanted to tap into the history and all that sort of thing, which is kind of similar to what myself and my wife Sarah is our experience and our background is that sort of thing anyway, primary producers. With regards to the building itself, we just stripped it right back, and it was really important for us that as soon as the customer walked in that door, they had that amazing warm energy. And I do firmly believe when you walk into a space or a building, whether it's a foyer of a building or whether it's a restaurant, that you have to feel an energy. And I think we've with the high ceilings and the open expanse and the space of the building, I think we really nailed the brief on that one. We had to do it because where the building itself was located, it's, on the peninsula, you've got amazing wineries and vineyards, which landscaping views across vines, should I say, sorry. We don't have that. So everything we had to create was within the four walls. And that was the difficulty in itself. So, from the amazing plant life that goes on inside there, they were as important as the furniture to us and the different spaces. So we got an outdoor space and then inside as well. And I think that's kind of where the evolution came from with the restaurant itself.
And Sean, you mentioned that you and Sarah have a background as primary producers. I know that the garden and the stuff that you're growing is so important to Wildgrain. Can you sort of join these dots for me? Yeah,
so basically I came to Australia 25 years ago from Ireland, and I came from a family which we probably slightly different to the normal upbringing in Ireland. My father was quite an avid huntsman, so we hunted a lot, we grew a lot, and everything. There was an economic side of it. There was 6 kids under the policeman's wage, so that was where my love for food started. And then my wife, her parents were dairy farmers in Gippsland, so that connection to the land and everything was there from the very early start. And it's one of the things that we've really tried to push forward with Wildgrain. Being in Sydney, you couldn't really do that. You're right smack in the middle of a huge city. You don't have areas that you can plant and grow and everything. So everything was coming through suppliers and everything as best you could. You could pick your best supply you could. But down here in the peninsula, you do have that opportunity to be able to go direct to farmers and go direct to producers. And for us as well, being that point of difference for the restaurant, we set up our own commercial greenhouse now, got our own garden beds going, and we want to try and produce as much as we possibly can for the restaurant and have the menu based around that, as opposed to writing a menu and then sourcing a product. You're growing the product and you're basing a menu around that. And it's been amazing. It's an amazing journey. I suppose a lot of it driven 2 years ago with supply chain issues and huge costs that were put on our primary producers, and your cost of bunch of chives. I mean, I remember last year looking at a bunch of chives from a supplier. It was coming in at like $7.80, and I was shaking my head going, this is not reality. It shouldn't be reality. But so then we just pushed on forward like crazy and got a commercial greenhouse and yeah, learning that ropes. I've been growing a lot since we opened the restaurant at home, and then just literally outgrew that. It was just gotten silly, really, to be honest. Literally silly. And I suppose in one sense it trains you to, if you see a small 2 square meters, what can I grow in that 2 small square meters? And I think that was a learning experience, that you don't have to have an expansive broadacre farm to be able to produce good quality product. You can do it in a small scale and do it properly. Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. So, I mean, a lot of restaurants, will grow a few herbs and, maybe put in a couple of tomato plants. But I mean, how much of what you serve is grown by you? Obviously it started small, and at the moment an awful lot. We're in the middle of winter, so we got a lot of the winter stuff going in the ground now, and now we're just waiting for them to a lot of the heirloom carrots, the heirloom beetroots, that sort of thing. All the broccolini at the moment. Well, probably 50% of the broccolini that we're using at the restaurant is coming from the greenhouse here, from the garden beds that we have outside, and from home as well. Things like garlic, I set myself a goal that I'm going to plant garlic this year, and we're going to plant enough to supply the restaurant for the whole year. That's what I wanted to do. Simple things like that. This summer, I'm going to plant as much of the pumpkins. We're going to try and supply pumpkins for the entire year for the restaurant and store them. Same with onions, that sort of thing. With regards to coming into spring and summer now, 100% every heirloom tomato I can grow, zucchini flowers, squash flowers, all of that, they'll all be produced here from our space here in Somerville. And I really enjoy doing it. It's been a learning curve, and working with Leo, our head chef, it's been amazing actually, the how we've gone down this avenue, and I think it's nothing but the benefits. We started on the menu probably about 7 or 8 menus ago. We started a farm gate section, probably driven again by the fact that protein was elevated to such a cost that it was, and then we kind of think we have to think smarter. We have to rethink how we're traveling here, and we started a farm gate section, which was basically everything on that section was vegetable based, and it was all from the local Mornington Peninsula area. Like at the moment, we got Brussels sprouts coming from Tyab, all our charred greens and everything are, like I said, we're either growing it or coming through Torello farm. All our kifler potatoes, Dutch carrots, all come from Huck's farm. All the garden leaves and everything that we said in the garden salad is all being produced by us. And it was a huge success, and people really gravitate towards that style of eating now, and that's the style of the restaurant that we want to try and push forward. Yeah. I love it. And just as you mentioned Hawke's Farm, I could not help but notice a vision of beautiful, hot, fresh chips flitter across my mind. Hawke's Farm's such a great place to visit to see what they're growing, and they've got a beautiful farm gate shop, but definitely to eat some of the best hot chips in the land. Yeah,
and there were the potatoes there we were buying, and we were using them as well. And I mean, simple thing like that, like the last public holiday weekend, we were using their Dutch carrots, and I normally texted Arthur on a Sunday, and I said, I need 6 boxes on Tuesday. And he goes, we could have a problem. We're really busy at the shop. And he goes, let me get back to you. And then he texted me, he goes, okay, the pickers are going out on Monday and they're going to pick for you. And so they picked them on the Monday, and I picked them up on the Tuesday morning, and they were on our plates by Wednesday lunch. And you know what I mean? So it's fresh out of the ground, 2-day-old carrots, but you can't do that in the city. And that's one of the amazing things about living on the peninsula that I really, really love,
Yeah, that is really amazing. And just, what you're saying speaks so much to the connections that you can build in community. So, Sean, what about the economics of it? I mean, gardening is a lot of work, and it doesn't always go as well as you might hope. I mean, does this save you money or cost you money?
Look, I suppose the main saving we have in the fact that I'm the business owner, so I work for free. So that's the that's the nuts and the bolts of it, really. We joke at home, I work 8 days a week and Sarah works 10 days a week, but that's just the reality of what we have to do. So when I'm not in the restaurant, I'm here every day. But I really enjoy doing it. I love the challenge and trying new things. And don't get me wrong, some things have worked and some things haven't worked. And it is about learning that, So I don't have the luxury of a university degree. My university is Instagram and YouTube and learning and watching from market gardeners across the world, actually. I had an amazing opportunity. I did a workshop about 10 months ago at Torella Farm. They brought in the Yoda of market gardening, Jody Roebuck from New Zealand. And he did a 2-day workshop there on basically, it's not so much about Instagram. It's a business and it has to work. And that's the nuts and bolts of it. So if you're setting up this sort of a situation, it's not a hobby. You need to make it work business-wise. And it was amazing. And there was people from all around Australia. And it was so good to be in that circle of people. I felt like I was with my tribe because it was such a movement away from mass-produced supermarket-style fresh produce to this sort of produce, which is done properly, without without pesticides, that type of thing. I mean, your average Australian wouldn't realize when they go into a supermarket and pick a head of broccoli off the shelf, it's been sprayed 14 times. Whereas with market gardening, that doesn't happen. Everything that we do is organic. Don't get me wrong, it's not certified organic. That's a different rabbit hole altogether. But, everything that we produce, there's no pesticides. Nothing goes on it. It's all organic. It really, really is. And you can taste the difference. I feel you can taste the difference, especially on the leaves and lettuces, which are so young. You can really see it and feel it. Yeah.
If there was someone listening to this thinking, all right, I'm going to look at, I've got a 2x2 patch of ground and I'm going to do something. What's a big lesson that you've learned?
I suppose a lot of it with regards to is the temperature and the sun and the climate that you have. I learned an awful lot of this in my house at home, and we had a large block. And when we built the house, we really wanted to have a more of a sustainable kind of living for us, the family and the kids and everything. So there was a large veggie patch there, all that thing, chickens, composting. And following the sun and the seasons, that was key for me. Learning the importance of what direction the sun's coming from, when too much, too little, too less, and then with the seasons, when to start planting and when to start growing, and that was key. And you will make mistakes. I've definitely made mistakes, and I've put it down to R&D or whatever you like to call it. And then when it works, it's like, wow. I mean, best thing for me when I walk in the greenhouse and I see a tray of seeds that I've just planted 4 days ago, and I got 100% germination. For me, that's amazing. That's a win. It's incredible. It's my eyes light up when I see it, just to see that germination and learning the art of it, like from the seed going in, the quality of the soil. The seed going into the ground, and then the conditions that you have around those seeds, whether it's the temperature and the humidity, which is a big thing, especially in a commercial greenhouse, and managing that. And then as the seed germinates, growing to a stem, and then being able to manage the moisture level on that stem without it being damaged. And that's been a learning curve in itself as well. So what we try and do is, I get a list from Leo and the chefs in the kitchen. I need XXXX, and then I'll cut it that morning. And so it's fresh as. So I then get into the restaurant, and the joy of seeing a customer eat whatever it is on the plate, and then seeing the reaction they have, and that you grew that. It's certainly an amazing feeling. It really is.
Oh, that's incredible. Let's talk more about the restaurant and about how you make it work as a business. What do you do to create menus that are both profitable and appealing?
You've got to definitely think differently. I think the days of just relying on suppliers and just relying on getting a pre-cut steak or whatever, or a beautiful snapper fillet, the cost of that now is just extreme. So, would you rate, if you can get short ribs for $20, $25, $26 a kilo, and then put a bit of skill into it, and then would you compare that to a steak, which has costed you $60, $70 a kilo? Is one better than the other? I disagree, but you've got to be able to think differently. We look at something like chicken. Would we have 2 years ago put chicken on our dinner menu? We probably definitely wouldn't have. But what we're doing with it now is, when you've got the skills that are there with Leo in the kitchen, he can turn something like a free-range chicken and turn it into something really special. Yeah, it's probably a 4-day process to do that, but it's something really special. And especially with the driving of the farm gate section, it's not just about a bunch of green vegetables dunked in a bit of salted water and then a little bit of butter sprinkled over them. It's nothing to do with that. That's a long time ago. Now it's elevated. There are dishes in themselves, and you try and get that sold at a table and you suggest it to 4 people sharing 1 or 2 of those farm gate sections, and the reaction is amazing actually, because they're like dishes on their own, So, but you have to think outside the square now. You have to adapt. The old days of, like I said, just relying on a protein on a side, you can't do that anymore. So.
Well, you mentioned Leo and how he's able to turn something, turn it into gold, which brings us to the question of staffing and skills and, maintaining a keen, engaged and a workforce that's always learning. Can you talk about some of your challenges, things that you're finding, whether it's around skills, whether it's around government policies that make your life harder? What's going on there?
Yeah, I suppose the main difference between when we were operating in Sydney, we operated in corporate areas and there were really busy corporate cafe sort of situations and insurance buildings and all that. And, I'd say 80% of our workforce was international students. It really, really was. And then moving down to the peninsula, you don't have that. You actually don't have that. So, and the only reason you got your local situation down here, and what we've had to bring in skills and sponsor people. And without that, Wildgrain wouldn't be there in its current form right now. It really, really wouldn't. And any of the large venues that are producing high quality food, et cetera, they have to do the same. But the cost involved in doing that is extreme. Absolutely extreme. So just to hold on to staff, we when we first set up Wildgrain, we wanted to have, it was pre-COVID, and we were doing breakfast, lunch and dinner, and the market was there. It was without question. We were doing a really high-end breakfast brunch sort of situation. After 7-8 lockdowns coming out of that, and then you got to a stage where we couldn't even run a roster, so we had to make a decision and find a pathway then, which was lunch and dinner. So where we are now to where we were 3 years ago, because we opened just 6 weeks before the first lockdown. So as the restaurant finding its identity and finding its pathway was a challenge from the scratch, and as well because we are, it's just myself and my wife involved in this. So we are a single operator, call it what you like, the mum and dad operation. I prefer to call us the rare breed. It's almost like it's getting harder and harder for these kind of operations to actually, number one, set up, and number two, sustain, because the costs of opening the doors now are extreme, and and large groups are now taking over the playing field, especially in the cities, and rightly so. And some of these large groups are doing world-class stuff. Absolutely amazing operations that they do, but they have it's almost like Mornington United taking on Chelsea, or that's how it feels like, or taking on Man United. It's a different playing field now. The large groups, they got huge cash flows. They can manage downturns. They've got HR on tap. They've got PR on tap. You can pay retainers to those people to open doors for them, and and that's just the way it is, and that's the way it's gone. So for us to operate when the costs are extreme, there's no doubt about it, and I think we are probably one of the hardest hospitality venues to keep going now. It really is, and that's just the way it is. But we have to think smarter. We have to think outside the square. Things like payroll tax, all that sort of thing. I think the Victorian government is still stuck in the 90s. It really is. It needs to be reformed, especially with the international students. I think you see, the last year you've seen some amazing large venues open up in Sydney and Melbourne. I think the change to the ruling in July, I think, is going to be catastrophic for those industries, those businesses.
So just for people who don't know, I'll just cut in, Sean, and just explain that. So through COVID, international students, restrictions on their working hours were removed. They were previously allowed to work 40 hours a fortnight. At the moment, and for a couple more weeks, they're allowed to work as much as they want, but the restrictions are coming back in with a 48-hour fortnight cap. So, what do you think that will do, Sean?
Oh, look, I think it'll affect the cities more so than it will say down on the Mornington Peninsula. But it's like putting a wet sponge on a table. Eventually, if that's the wet sponge and the city dries up, it's going to soak up everything, and that's what we found coming out of the last lockdown. There was no international students in the cities, which meant that hiring people down in, we'll say, a regional area like Mornington Peninsula was 100 times harder. But basically, I think one of the things that when we were operating in Sydney, like I said, 80% was international students, and the cash element is just it's mind blowing how it fuels the cash economy in the cities. It's absolutely disgusting, to be honest, because it becomes then a non-level playing field for everybody trying to do the compliant thing, which you have to try and do these days because it's extreme, the penalties and that sort of thing. But I feel those large venues in the city that have X, Y, and Z of international students doing 40, 50 hours a week, well, that's going to stop. They'll remove an awful lot of those people, and I think you'll see a rebalancing, which I don't think it's going to be pretty, to be honest. Yeah,
it's really tough, isn't it? Because we know that we know life is expensive in the cities and the regions, and if I think about trying to survive on 20 hours work a week or 24 hours work a week, I just think, well, I don't really know how I could do that. So naturally, people are going to try to get more hours. They're going to, as you say, be pushed into the cash economy. Which, yeah, as you say, it's not a level playing field. It's they're open to exploitation.
Extreme exploitation. And I've seen and I've heard stories that when we were operating in Sydney, people coming for work, and some of the stories were horrific. And yeah, and it's not good. It really isn't good. I can't understand for the life of me why the immigration department think it's a good thing. It's nothing but negative. Even from a GST point of view or a PAYG point of view, it's madness, to be honest. It really is.
Yeah. I find it disrespectful to those students who are, they're adults, they're coming here, they're investing in education.
Yeah.
I just think why not respect them as adults to be able to manage their own time?
Oh, 100%. It's bonkers. They're still treated as a cash avenue for industry, for the education economy. And if the universities didn't have them, they wouldn't be existing. Well, it would be existing, but in a very different format. And it's sad to see that they're being pushed into that corner again. I thought we'd learned something from COVID. If we had, just because it was, shouldn't mean it should still be. And it's one of those things.
You mentioned payroll tax. There's also been an increase to the work cover premium. The cost of goods is going up. It's great that you can grow broccolini, but I'm assuming you're still needing to buy some staples, like cooking oil or whatever it might be. What are the biggest things concerning you in keeping your business profitable?
You see, I think with regards to when customers come in and they understand, customers see media and they see news and the cost of living and the cost of iceberg gate and everything, all of that sort of thing, and they will relate the cost of the restaurant to what they see on their plate. Then that's just as far as it goes. They don't relate to the extreme costs you're now paying for labor. The utilities are gone absolutely off the charts, and people don't realize that. Our come February 1st, our gas bill went up $8,000 overnight. Come July, our electricity bill is probably going to go up another $8,000 as well. And then on top of that, what you're paying for labor and for wages then is a percentage of what the payroll tax comes after you. And, payroll tax was brought it was at the 80s or whatever as a tax on big business, which would be equivalent to what you earn in your Apple and your Google and your Telstra, all that sort of thing now. But your average small business is now paying payroll tax. So your average restaurant who's got 10 to 12 staff, they're paying payroll tax, and yet your average Australian wouldn't know what payroll tax is. They wouldn't have a clue. They just think it's PAYG, where it's not. It's a tax on a tax. And I'll be honest, Dani, it's one of our hardest bills to pay. It really is. It's those guys in state revenue collection. They make the ATO look like Boy Scouts. They're brutal. They're one step away from telling you sell a child. They don't care. It's insane. And it's And one of the other elements is, again, your workers' compensation. It's all relative to what your wages are. And if your wages are the highest they've ever been, well, then all those other elements, the cost to open those doors, have increased dramatically. And that's where it comes to the rare breed operators, the single operators. managing that cash flow and managing the downturns, especially what we're facing coming up in this winter. I think we're well and truly in for a little squeeze. Everyone's finding it hard now we've even seen the change in when people coming in, instead of going for 2 courses, 3 courses, they're going straight to main course. Instead of bottles of wine, they're probably only having 1 glass of wine. And that's just a result of what's happening in the economy at the moment. And for us, we need to be able to still keep that positivity. Customers don't want to hear a broken record. They don't want to be handed a box of tissues when they walk in the door. They still want to come, they still want to come in for that positive experience, and you want to be able to create that for them. And whether it's that value for money on the menu, don't have steaks costing $60, $70 a portion, you still need to have, that sort of thing. You still need to have that value for money, and creating that skill level that we can, and creating that season. There's 4 seasons in the year. We like to try and produce work around the 8 seasons of the year. Early spring, late spring, early autumn, late autumn, early winter, late winter, that sort of thing. And especially if you've got a good summer, you can run your heirloom tomatoes all the way through summer and coming out the other end into early autumn. And that's kind of where we need to try and push. It's the only thing we can do to control the costs involved in the restaurant right now. It is literally the only thing. Yeah.
Sean, you sound so passionate about what you do and about the important place that the rare breeds, the sole operators, as you call yourself, have in this industry. I mean, what do you think businesses such as yours add to the landscape, both for diners and for employment opportunities, and just for the vibe of a regional town like Mornington?
I think it's everything. We've seen a shift in the main street in Mornington in the last, I'd say, 6 to 10 months, and it's driven by rents without question. And it comes back to these large groups in the cities. They're the ones who can afford those large rents and 6-month bonds and all that sort of thing. Your average rare breed operator can't do that. And we've seen an awful lot of the large chains move in at the end of the town there. And, they can knock out a fit out in 2 months and that sort of thing. And everything is cookie cutter kind of thing to an element. And I feel that sort of thing is detrimental to a town. It takes away from the character of a town. It takes away from the vibe of what going along a street and seeing lovely single operating venues operate and all work together as a collaboration to make this town better. And I think that those large things take away from that. I really do. And I think it's detrimental to it, to be honest. But again, it comes down to the economic side of things, the market rates that commercial real estates like to use. And unfortunately, that's where we're heading. And it's happening in the cities, and it's well and truly coming to regional towns like Mornington now. It is.
Do you think consumers, you mentioned you've already noticed that people are perhaps watching what they spend more closely. Do you think there's something in consumers looking for safety when they spend, and perhaps, if they don't already know you as a business, they perhaps are drawn to restaurants from the bigger groups or those chains because they feel like it's more of a sure bet?
Oh, look, there is that. But I think if you can create your own dialogue and your own narrative as to what your story is and get that out as best you can, that's the only thing you've got going for you. And as soon as you're creating a dining experience that it's a dining experience from the very beginning to the very end, and that's what we try and do at the restaurant. And even I said to the guys, Leo in the kitchen, and also Clem, our restaurant manager, everything has to be on point now. Now, more so than ever, it has to be on point because people are really, really thinking about where they're going out now. They really need to be certain if they're going out and they're spending X, because that X amount that's being spent now, I can't understand why RBA and inflation is going to go down. I can't see it because the cost of everything is not going to go down. And so when people are coming out now, they need to be confident that, okay, they might spend an extra $2 or $3 or whatever it is on the main course or a side, but it's going to be good quality, and it has to be good quality. They have to see that value for money, and I think that's essential for us to get through this thing. Whether or not that's going to change the pricing of everything, I can't see it. I'll be honest, I can't see it.
It really, it just sounds like you guys are dancing on a precipice with, delivering that joyful experience, but with all these pressures sort of running underneath.
Yeah, it is, and it's what I call what lies beneath. And that's where the sleepless nights for an business owner, come into play. There's no doubt about it. But again, if you're confident in the product you're doing and confident in the service that you're giving to the customer, it will survive. You take your foot off the pedals for 1 minute, and I think especially in this kind of market, and I think that's when the doors close. And unfortunately, I think there's going to be a bit of a downturn coming. I hate to say it. There's definitely Sydney and Melbourne are still cooking with gas. They're still firing on all cylinders. They've got a corporate card up there, which is going very well. There's the dollar there from the corporate scene is very strong still, and there's certain elements of that corporate market which is going gangbusters. And they do have that huge population in the cities. Whereas down here on the Mornington Peninsula, most people have mortgages, most people have, cost of living expenses, private schools, all that sort of thing. And I'll be honest, I think that's where the squeeze is starting more so. Everyone's rents in the cities, yes, have gone up. Yeah, they've gone up a couple of $100 a week, but people on a peninsula with a Mornington Peninsula mortgage, they're increased by thousands a month. So, and that's where we've seen the change. So
that's the reality. Well, sure. Let's lean into the joy of the experience that you're creating. And if I come down, I know I'm going to have the short rib, and I'm looking for that broccolini. But what else would you feed me?
Oh, look, people ask me, what would you recommend? What you would recommend? And there's, like I said, we change the menu as much as we possibly can with the seasons, and what I'm really strong believer in. It's got to be seasonal for optimum flavor, taste, and also affordability. Simple things like we do a tempura garden chard as an entree, and everything on that plate we comes from us, So the chard we grow, it's just simply tempura. He makes a house cultured cashew cheese. Leo makes it in-house. The green goddess sauce, everything comes from our garden, the pickle seeds and stems. And yet it's such a simple dish, but every single time when you see people eating it, you see the whites in their eyes as to how good it is. It really is. Simple thing like the cauliflowers that we do, sambal roasted. I've never tasted cauliflower like it. It's a simple thing. The chicken, again, it's a 4-day process type of thing. It's amazing. The short rib, and again, anything from the farm gate section. I think they're dishes on their own, but elevated to a point where this is really, really good. Yeah. But again, never been more proud of where we've elevated to and where we've gone to in the last 3.5 years. I think where our pathway now is very strong, very positive. We just need to do what we need to do behind the doors to keep that going. And it's all about managing that now from here on in.
Love it. Sean, just finally, it crosses my mind that you're so articulate about the challenges that you're facing as a small business owner. Do you feel like restaurants have a voice to government at any level?
No, we definitely don't. And it's one thing that's been really strong in my mind, especially in the last, we'll say, 2 years. Hospitality, people are people pleasers. To be good in hospitality, you want to make people pleased and happy, and you want to see, so we're not that kind of industry that does, demonstrations and kick doors down, and, we don't do that. But I feel like our industry is definitely missing from the political table and those tables that decisions are made, like especially with the international students, with payroll tax, with all those other elements that affect our industry. I feel as we're missing a voice at that table without question. I'm not being disrespectful to other big venues in the industry, but I think when the only voice that seems to be there are those venues with large gaming and gambling, and they're the ones that lobby governments, and they're the ones that make those kind of changes. Whereas our restaurant side of things, it's missing. It's well and truly missing. And I think for us to survive, we need a voice at that table, and we need some sort of organization within the hospitality industry to be at that table of decision making. It can't be just, where was the consultation with changing the working hours for international students, and the impact it'll have on the industry is extreme. The costs it takes to employ and sponsor people, for us, it's extreme as a small business. And why does the government think it's still okay to fine, I'm going to use the word fine, a business to sponsor someone from overseas, even though they're already in the country, and they'll say it's a training levy. It's not a training levy. Why does a small business have to pay that fine. I'm going to use the word fine because it is. Is it up to nearly $3,000 per employee? When we know there's a skill shortage in this country, they're not there. And I think we did that to ourselves, with regards to apprentices and taste and everything. We that started probably a good 15 years ago. And society, Australians did that to themselves by encouraging anyone school leaving, anyone, wanting to get a real job or get any successful job, you had to go to university. And that was a dialogue. And that's, I think, where the damage started. So you had a good 15 years of people not going into trades. You look at construction industry. We are so short in that industry as well. It's ridiculous. And we did that to ourselves. I'm a firm believer. I see a change coming now. Probably started with the indexation on industry, on university, on the HECSs and everything. You'll see people leaving school now, hopefully, and going, no, I don't actually necessarily have to go to university. I can go in and do an apprenticeship, or I can do an internship. It's a different pathway. That'll take a bit of time to change. But like I said, I think we need, as an industry, hospitality needs a voice at the table. It really does, because we are so important for the image, for tourism, for the international perception of Australia. Hospitality does so much more than just cook food. It really does.
It certainly does. And I mean, I'm personally grateful for all the energy you're putting into your business, creating that point of difference, bringing life to Mornington, bringing the seeds to the plate. I love it, Sean. Seed to plate.
It is a seed to plate philosophy, and it starts from the very ground. It really does.
Thank you so much for sharing with us today. It's really, really fantastic chat, and can't wait to visit you down there in Mornington at Wildgrain, Sean.
Thanks again, Dani. I really appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
This is Dirty Linen, and I'm Dani Valent. We air the issues that the hospitality industry finds hard to talk about, hearing from different people with unique perspectives. We want to hear from you as well. If you have something that needs to be said about a topic, get in touch so we can include your perspective. Contact us at dirtylinen@deepintheweeds.com.au or hit us up on Insta at Dirty Linen Podcast. We can't wait to hear from you.
This